Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from round 1 of the Chess Olympiad that started yesterday. Sorry about not posting any videos. I attended a wedding, so that's why I was unable to post anything. I could have posted a video from the wedding, but that would just be weird. I'm sure you guys agree. So let's dive straight into it. It is David Silva versus Levon Aronian, and it is one of the games that could have great repercussions on the further developments at the Chess Olympiad. Since Levon is playing, of course, for the United States, and the United States are the favorites to win the Olympiad. But it's, that doesn't really matter all that much. It's not all that common for the favorites to win, and especially with now with China and Russia not playing, pretty much India is the only serious contender to the United States. So absolutely every point and half a point matters, and that's why this game, I believe, could be very important. But we're gonna discuss about the results after we check it out. So it's David Silva, board 1 for Angola, rapid and classical champion, versus Levon Aronian, of course, who needs no further introduction. Let's check out the game and see what's it about. So Silva opens with e4. We have c5. Levon goes for the Sicilian defense. Knight f3. We have d6 and bishop to b5 with check. We have knight to d7, defending against the canal attack, the c3, and now knight g to f6. And here, as the e4 pawn is attacked, standard way to place to develop the queen. Queen e2 defends the pawn, and then you continue playing. But here we have bishop back to d3. A weird looking move since you already developed the bishop, but it is one of the top played moves here, so nothing out of the ordinary yet. But now comes Levon's next move, and that is knight to e5. Here g6 is the standard idea, or e6 or a6, but not knight to e5. Basically, in top level chess, only Maxim Vachier-Lagrave played this move twice, and he played it in 2018 against none other than Levon Aronian. So Levon had this position with white pieces against Maxim. One game he lost, one game he won in the London Chess Classic, but in that game bishop to e2 was played by Levon in both games. However, here we have knight captures on e5, d captures on e5, and now there are a few games where bishop to e2 was played, but here we have bishop to c2 by David Silva, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Levon continues. g6, he's preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop. d3, as Levon now has very nice control over the d4 square, and bishop to g7. We have bishop to e3, b6, and both players castles. So castles, and now pawn to h3. We have bishop to a6, not allowing this pawn to move as the rook would hang. So rook to e1, and now queen to d6, developing the queen, connecting rooks, and preparing to bring the rooks into the game. We have knight to a3, and now rook a to d8. We have queen to f3, also developing the queen, connecting the rooks, and now knight to h5, with idea of shifting the bishop over to b7 to claim this diagonal and then execute f5. So here rook a to d1, bishop to b7, and now bishop to b3. Now stopping f5 as the king is on g8, so Levon just gets out of the way. We have king to h8, and now queen to g4. Again, stopping f5. And here Levon plays queen to c6. Now it's definitely a good battery having the queen and bishop placed like this. f5 can be played. Of course, you will not be checkmating the white king since the queen is still covering the g2 square, but it is very unpleasant. And although you don't have to do this because white can just play bishop to d5, but Levon being Levon, that's exactly why he played it. So here we have bishop to d5 attacking Levon's queen, and now comes rook captures on d5. He gives up the exchange to take out a very strong piece, that is the light square bishop. So e captures and queen captures. He now wins a pawn, and he opens up this diagonal to be used for attacking purposes. So f3, closing this diagonal indefinitely, and now comes queen back to c6. Here again, you could start rushing with with a move like pawn to f5, then the queen goes to e4, attacks the pawn, and so on. That pawn really doesn't do all that much for you. You can never capture it because of rook to a8, so that would be silly. But okay, here Levon instead goes queen to c6 first. Now takes away the a4 square from the white queen, but now queen to c4. So what do you play here? We have queen to d6 now. And queen to a4. We have queen back to b8, now putting the queen here. You are defending this pawn, so it's no longer an issue. And now comes pawn to b4. You can check out, like I said, the interview with Silva after you check out this game. He says a lot, so I don't want to spoil too much, but I will need your help with one part of the interview, as I cannot understand what is being said. I've tried many times. So c captures on b4, we have queen captures on b4, and now rook to e8, defending the e7 pawn as the queen was attacking it, and now pawn to c4, just slowly but surely making progress. We have knight to f6 by Levon, and now comes knight to b5, and it's not easy playing this with black, as I'm sure you guys agree. Knight to d7, and now pawn to a4. We have pawn to a5 attacking the queen, but just queen to b1. And now this b6 pawn will be a weakness for the rest of the game. And there really aren't all that many weaknesses for Levon's bishop pair to hone on to. So king to g8, and now bishop back to f2, opening up the e file for the rook. We have bishop to c6. Now the queen and bishop are guarding that, queen and knight are guarding that b6 pawn, and queen to b3. We have knight to c5 now, attacking the queen, and David very gladly trades here. We have bishop captures, pawn captures. Now both of these pawns will be somewhat weak, and queen back to c2. We have bishop back to d7, and rook to b1, now preparing rook b3 and rook e to b1 to double up on the b file. Rook to c8, and now queen to d2, putting pressure on the a5 pawn, so queen to b6, defending the pawn, and now rook to b3, just doubling up on the b file. We have queen back to d8, and now rook e to b1. So not all that much for Levon to do. He just has to wait and see what Silva will come up with. We have rook to b8 and queen to e3 now, putting pressure on the c5 pawn, and it's not easy for Levon to find the move. Basically, a rook to c8, defending the pawn. You have knight a7, attack the rook. Now both of the rooks can enter the game. You are infiltrating this position, and it's going to be very, very difficult to defend this position. So Levon doesn't want to go into this. He tries what he always does best. He complicates, and he plays pawn to e4. And we've reached the position from the thumbnail, as now there are many threats in the position. You can see that if the bishop somehow gets the d4, then Silva might lose the queen. Of course, you first have to eliminate the knight, but it's not a problem. If Silva makes a weird move, we're just going to eliminate the knight and play bishop to d4. So you have to be very careful here. But even with all that, it's still not as clear. For example, d captures on e4, and now if rook captures on b5, you can play a captures, get a beautiful pass pawn here, and now, okay, bishop d4, you do win the queen. For example, captures, b6, now comes c5, and black is better here, but it's very, very hard to say if you will actually be able to win this. So it's a very tricky position. But okay, after e4, of course, Silva does not blunder this. He plays queen captures on e4, gets the queen out of this dark square diagonal immediately, and now Levon plays pawn to e6. We have queen to f4, now putting a whole lot of pressure on black's position. Ideas like knight to d6, opening up an attack on the rook and on the f7 pawn, and Levon can basically resign. He has to play something, there aren't all that many moves he can play. So here we have bishop to e8, guarding that f7 pawn, preventing any discoveries, and now king to h1, just getting the king to a bit of a safer square, not having to worry about any checks. We have pawn to h5, and now queen to d6. Silva says, I'm up the exchange, let's trade queens, I'm going to win this endgame. But here Levon played bishop to f8, and he was in this position on move 41 that David Silva and Levon Aronian agreed to a draw. for some reason, and that is why I mentioned. Do check out the interview by Silva after the game. I will put a link to it. First thing you will see, he does mention why they drew the game, but I could not understand it. If any of you guys can, figure out why, what the reason of the draw is, feel free to type in the comments, and I will pin it for everyone else to see. But from what I've got out of it is that he says that he can still lose this. I mean, it's Levon, and it's a team event, so even half a point for his team, he's more than happy with a draw against Levon Aronian. But if you guys have time, do check it out and try and figure out everything that he said. But of course, Levon still has the bishop pair. He's down the exchange, but you of course don't expect to beat Levon from this position, but with some nice moves, it is possible. And for example, you just trade queens, queen captures, rook captures, and you start bringing your king into the game. There isn't really anything black can do. Everything is nicely defended by white. You just have to march your king all the way to c2, move the knight, and then win these two pawns, and that's pretty much it. For example, bishop g7, we're going to play king f2. For example, bishop to e5, king to e3. Not all that much for black to do. g5, knight to c3. You have to be careful not to blunder the a4 pawn. And here, if bishop captures on c3, rook captures, and bishop captures on a4, you do win this pawn, but then rook a3 attacks the bishop, then you win this pawn, then this pawn falls, then the entire position just falls apart. So basically best would be something like king g7, king d2, like we mentioned, bring the king over to c2, bishop f4 check, king c2, and now h4, and now finally rook to b7. You double up on the 7th rank, and then you go after these two pawns. There's really not all that much black can do here. Rook a8 to defend the pawn, rook 1 to b6, now you're threatening rook captures on e6, so king to g6, rook to e7, now doubling up here, king to f6, we were going to play rook b to b7, and now, well, this pawn becomes weak, this pawn also becomes weak. You can deliver a nice check, pick up the pawn, so it's dead loss for Levon, but like I said, I'm pretty sure that it is because it's a team event. That's why Silva, agreed to a draw. So yeah, a tough break for Levon and for the United States, as their main competitor India, who has quite a few teams. India has 6 teams in this Olympiad, won all of their matches with a perfect score, and United States defeated Angola with only 3.5 to half, as this a spectacular half point was taken away from Levon by David Silva. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, it could be that this will have a lot to do with the final standings of the Olympiad. We'll see how it goes. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Mitkins, and I would like to thank Joshua Figueroa Lintag, Richard Nickerson, Alison Silva, and David Kimura for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on the Olympiad. Make sure to suggest as many games as possible. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.